Okay students, welcome to the another video. This is the new topic, and today we are going to discuss digestion of nucleic acids. If you remember, in the last few lectures we discussed the physiology of digestion, and in physiology of digestion we discussed digestion of carbohydrates, various enzymes that act upon the carbohydrates in different regions of the alimentary canal. We discussed the digestion of proteins, and we also discussed the digestion of fats. This is another point, that is digestion of nucleic acids. We have to mention some important enzymes which can act upon the nucleic acids if our diet, if our food contains DNA and RNA, right? So obviously the animal foods, even the plant foods may contain the nucleic acids, but these nucleic acids are digested in our digestive system. And what are the different types of enzymes which act upon these nucleic acids, we will discuss, right? Let's start. So far as the nucleic acids are concerned, we know that there are only two types of nucleic acids. We are very familiar with the topic. There are two types of nucleic acids. One is DNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid, another is RNA, ribose nucleic acid, right? And this DNA and RNA, both these DNA and RNA, these are made up of nucleotides. They are polymers of nucleotides. Their monomeric units are the different types of nucleotides depending upon the nitrogenous base containing adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine in DNA, adenine, guanine, uracil and cytosine in RNA. We have discussed the difference between DNA and RNA. So these nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, when they are hydrolyzed, when they are digested by our digestive enzymes, they are hydrolyzed into their constituent units, what we call as nucleotides. So DNA will be hydrolyzed into nucleotides and RNA will be hydrolyzed, digested into nucleotides, right? Now what are the enzymes? Now we have to understand what are the enzymes which act on DNA, which act upon the RNA. Actually the first enzymes that are present for the digestion of DNA and RNA are present in the pancreatic juice. So let's see the action of pancreatic juice on the nucleic acids. So far as this pancreatic juice is concerned, in pancreatic juice there are two types of enzymes. One is known as DNase and another is known as RNase. These are the two types of enzymes for DNA and RNA respectively, right? This one acts on the DNA, this one acts upon the RNA, right? So let's show with the help of simple reactions, right? So for example, if the food contains DNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid, in presence of this enzyme pancreatic juice contains this enzyme, that is DNase. So in presence of this DNase, this DNA will be broken into deoxyribonucleotides. Likewise, there is enzyme for the RNA. So for example, if our diet contains RNA, we have enzyme for this RNA as well. The enzyme is known as RNase, and this RNA will be broken into ribonucleotides. And you also know the difference between deoxyribonucleotides and ribonucleotides. Here we have the sugar, pentose sugar, that is deoxyribose, right? And here we have the sugar, that is ribose. And what is the difference between deoxyribose and ribose? We have already discussed this point in the biomolecules, right? If you have any confusion, you can go to your book, you can consult your book, and you will find the difference between the deoxyribonucleotide and ribonucleotide. There is simple difference. Deoxyribose is without oxygen at the 2 carbon, that is 2 prime carbon, 2 prime deoxyribose, while this ribose sugar is having hydroxyl group at the 2 prime carbon in the pentose sugar, right? Anyways, this DNA will be converted into deoxyribonucleotides. It will release the deoxyribonucleotides. RNA will give these ribonucleotides. But there are enzymes in our digestive system which can even break these deoxyribonucleotides and ribonucleotides. That means these can further be hydrolyzed into their constituent parts, because these deoxyribonucleotides and ribonucleotides, they have a complex structure. They are made up of, you know, 3 different constituents: phosphate, sugar and nitrogenous base. So they can be further hydrolyzed in our digestive system, right? They are not put intact by our digestive system. So their identity is lost, because you know the nucleotides are the building blocks of DNA. So they are not put intact in our digestive system. Our digestive system is capable of hydrolyzing them completely, right? So this deoxyribonucleotide and ribonucleotide gets completely broken into their constituent parts. For example, this deoxyribonucleotide, which is the structural constituent of the DNA, right? This deoxyribonucleotide. Now we have to see the action of intestinal juice. Yes, this is the action of intestinal juice. In intestinal juice, Succus entericus, there are again 2 types of enzymes which can break these deoxyribonucleotides and ribonucleotides. So we will simply write the nucleotides. It can be the nucleotide of DNA, it can be nucleotide of RNA. So this nucleotide or nucleotides are hydrolyzed by enzymes called as nucleotidases. And this nucleotidase is the secretion of intestinal juice. This is the enzyme of intestinal juice. And in presence of nucleotides, this nucleotide gets converted into, yes, it gets converted into phosphate, inorganic phosphate. There is release of phosphate, plus there is release of nucleoside. We know that nucleotide is actually the phosphate ester of phosphate ester of nucleoside. So when we remove the phosphate from the nucleoside, it will be converted into nucleoside. There is release of phosphate from the nucleotide and we will get the phosphate plus nucleoside. But this can be further converted into its constituent parts. For example, if we write nucleoside, it can be the nucleoside of DNA, remember, it can be nucleoside of RNA. So in presence of enzyme, the enzyme is known as nucleosidase, and this nucleoside will give what? Pentose sugar. It can be deoxyribose, it can be ribose, depending upon the type of nucleoside. So pentose sugar, we will get the pentose sugar plus nitrogenous base, you know, that is adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine in DNA and adenine, guanine, cytosine, uracil in RNA, right? So in this way we have completely digested the nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, first into nucleotides, then nucleotides can get further converted into pentose, this phosphate and nucleoside gets broken into pentose sugar and nitrogenous base. So this is the complete digestion of the nucleic acids in the small intestine with the help of enzymes, the enzymes of pancreatic juice, DNase, RNase, and the enzymes of intestinal juice, nucleotidases and nucleosidases, right? So with this we have almost completed this physiology of digestion. Now our next aspect is, in this unit, in this chapter, the next aspect that we need to discuss is the physiology of absorption. Yes, physiology of absorption. So my next point of discussion is physiology of absorption. How these different nutrients which are released after the digestion of various food molecules, how these different nutrients are absorbed, because we have to absorb them, and after absorption they must be assimilated, they must be supplied to the different cells of the body. And you know, there are 2 important body fluids which transport these nutrients in our body. One is the blood, main circulatory fluid, and another is the lymph. So they must reach these body fluids, they must reach these circulation, so that they can be assimilated to the different parts of the body, different cells of the body. So we have to understand the process of absorption. So let's discuss here. This is the next part, that is physiology of absorption. Physiology of absorption, right? You know this word absorption, it is a generalized term. It is used in different phenomena. It is used in physics, it is used in chemistry, but here we are supposed to discuss absorption of nutrients in the small intestine, right? Here this process of absorption is concerned with the transport of different nutrients from the lumen of the small intestine into the blood or into the lymph, and where from they are transported to the different cells of the body. So here we have this, this absorption is a different concept. Otherwise this is the same process whether it's physics or chemistry, right? Something is absorbed, something is transported from the one end to another end, right? But here we are mainly concerned with the absorption of molecules which are absorbed particularly in the small intestine, which is having a lot of surface area for the absorption, right? So first of all, let me try to explain this term, what is absorption, what do we mean by absorption here in digestive system, here in the alimentary canal, right? Now this absorption, the term absorption means here, it is the transport of, if you want to write the definition, it is the transport of nutrient molecules, the transport of different nutrient molecules from lumen of gut, wherever they are absorbed, right? So transport of nutrient molecules from lumen of gut into the blood, or some molecules are absorbed into the lymph. As I told you, these are the two important circulatory fluids. So the transport of nutrient molecules, let's say for example this is the section of the gut, right? This is the lumen of the gut, and here we have the different types of molecules that we have obtained after the digestion with the help of different types of enzymes. Now these nutrient molecules, carbohydrates have released the sugars, proteins are converted into amino acids, fats have given the glycerol and fatty acids, right? Plus we have some different minerals that we take in our diet. We have vitamins as well, water soluble, fat soluble. They are also absorbed, they are also transported to the blood or the lymph, right? So this is for example the lumen of the gut, this is the lumen of the small intestine for example. So these molecules need to go from this end to this end, that means from the lumen of the small intestine into the blood. Here we have either blood, or here for example we have the lymph vessels. So here we have the blood capillaries, or here we have the for example lymph vessels, and these all nutrients, sugars, amino acids, fatty acids, whatever, they are all received by either blood or by the lymph, which carry them to the different cells of the body, right? Via the circulation, via the systemic circulation, right? So this is actually the process of absorption. So let me repeat again this definition. This is transport of nutrient molecules from the lumen of the gut into the blood. So these molecules, they will move from the lumen of the gut into the blood, into the lymph, but this is a very interesting process, because these molecules need to go through some barriers. They have to cross some cells, they have to cross some barriers, then they will reach to the blood and lymph, where from they are transported to the circulation, right? So we have to understand this process of absorption is actually a transport process, right? It's a transport process, and we know that this transport, wherever it occurs in the body, wherever it occurs in the organisms, this transport from outside to inside the cell or vice versa, this occurs either passively or actively. So this process of absorption, the process of absorption where the nutrient molecules are transported from the lumen of the gut into the blood or the lymph, it is either a passive process, passive transport, what I mean, or it is active process. Here passive means which is taking place along the concentration gradient from higher concentration to the lower concentration. When the molecules move from the higher concentration to the lower concentration across the membranes, right, this is known as passive process. And we know that here we don't need any kind of energy of ATP to transport the molecules from the one end to the another end across the membrane, right. But active process here the molecules are moving from the lower concentration to higher concentration, that means against the concentration gradient. And obviously when we are working against the concentration gradient, we need energy. So there is always consumption of energy in the active process. So this is the main difference, right. Further these topics are explained in the membrane transport, cell biology and all that, but here you please try to understand what do you mean by passive and active process. So this process of absorption which I have defined, this process of absorption can be passive, it can be active. Here in passive process there is no need of energy, there is no consumption of energy, but in active process there is consumption of energy. And you know, the energy which is consumed for the transport of molecules in the body, in the cells, is the energy of ATP generally, right. So, right, this can be further classified, this passive process, you know, this can be diffusion, simply diffusion of molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration. This can be osmosis, that's the solvent molecules move from the higher concentration to lower concentration across the semi-permeable membranes, right. Active process, this is always against the concentration gradient, and it can be primary active transport or it can be secondary active transport as well. Primary, where the one molecule is carried, where the one molecule is transported against the concentration gradient. In secondary active transport there is coupling of uphill and downhill processes. Coupling means, you know, two things are happening simultaneously. One molecule is moving from the higher concentration to lower concentration, that is passive, but another molecule through the same transporter is moving from the lower concentration to higher concentration, that is against the concentration gradient. So two molecules are moving in the same direction, but one needs energy, other doesn't need energy, that is secondary active transport. So please try to understand. We can go into the details of these processes in cell biology, but here we have to understand at least one thing, that is passive means there is no consumption of energy and along the concentration gradient, and active process means molecules are transported against the concentration gradient and there will be consumption of energy. So far as this process of absorption is concerned, where the nutrient molecules are transported from the lumen of the gut into the blood, into the lymph, this can be passively, this can be actively, right. But besides the process of transport, passive or active, for the absorption of molecules we need lot of absorptive surface. So the another prerequisite thing, that's important thing for the process of absorption, is the surface area, that is absorptive surface area, right. And so far as alimentary canal is concerned, human digestive system is concerned, we know that in the human digestive system, the small intestine, let's say again, this is small intestine, the innermost wall of the small intestine here, this innermost wall of the small intestine here, that's very close to the lumen, right. And this innermost wall of the small intestine gut, that is called mucosa. In small intestine it is modified into the brush border epithelium. In the small intestine, this epithelium, right, that is the innermost lining of the gut, is modified into finger like projections, and those finger like projections, if we take a section from here for example, those finger like projections are called villi, right, villi singular is villus. These are the microscopic structures, villi, they give the brush border appearance to the inner wall of the gut, right. And these villi, they are so many in number, they are millions in number, and besides these villi, villus, they have some electron microscopic hair like structures on them, and these electron microscopic tiny structures are called as microvilli, right? So this is the modification in the human gut, in the small intestine, particularly in the jejunum and ileum part, right? There are so many villi and there are so many microvilli, and these have increased this, these have provided this absorptive surface, large absorptive surface, right, for the process of this absorption. So my point is, we need the, you know, the transport mechanism, passive or active, for the process of absorption. Second thing that's very important, that is absorptive surface area. More the surface area, more is the process of absorption. So this absorptive surface area is provided by the small intestine in the jejunum ileum part, particularly the wall is modified into villi and microvilli, which have provided lot of surface area for the process of absorption. And these villi and microvilli, right, they absorb the molecules, they absorb the different nutrients from the lumen of the small intestine. Then finally I told you these molecules move to the blood or to the lymph. So both the things are present in the villi and microvilli. In villi and microvilli there are many blood vessels, there are many blood capillaries. Let's say this is blood capillary, right? Blood capillary, which these blood capillaries, all those molecules which are water soluble, water and water soluble molecules, right, which are, for example, absorbed by the, let's say, water soluble molecules, amino acids or sugars, whatever, right. All these molecules are absorbed by the villi and microvilli. Finally, after the absorption, after their transport via the villi and microvilli, they finally go to the blood capillaries. So you have to here keep in mind that all water soluble molecules, amino acids, right, sugars, some water soluble vitamins, minerals, right, which get dissolved in the water, they move first through the villi and microvilli, and then finally they go to the blood capillaries. But there are some molecules, for example the fat molecules, which do not go to the blood capillaries. But the blood capillaries have very small lumen, they have very small diameter. So the bigger molecules which are having the higher molecular weight, large molecular weight, so they are absorbed by the villi and microvilli, but they do not go to the blood capillaries. In villi and microvilli there is another thing, that is receiving the fat and fat soluble molecules, and these are some lymph vessels, and these lymph vessels are the special lymph vessels called as, these are called as lacteals. These are called lacteals. Yes, the lymph vessels are called lacteals, and these lacteals, so please try to understand, these villi and microvilli, they have given the absorptive surface, they have provided the absorptive surface for the process of absorption. But after the absorption, how these molecules are carried, how these molecules are transported, two things are there in the villi and microvilli. One is blood capillaries, which receive the different water soluble molecules, and there are some lymph vessels as well. Lymph vessels are called lacteals, and these lacteals, they receive the fat soluble molecules and fat itself, right, in the form of a pale yellow fluid that's known as chyle. By the way, when the fat is absorbed, this absorbed fat by the lymphatic vessels is known as chyle. This is chyle, the pale yellow fluid received by the lacteals from the villi and microvilli, right, that's known as chyle. Another thing is chyme, that we have observed in the stomach, that is the gastric juice plus food, that's known as chyme. This is chyle, that is fat which is absorbed by the lymph vessels, lacteals, in the villi and microvilli. So please try to understand, these villi and microvilli are provided with blood capillaries, which receive the different water soluble molecules absorbed by the villi and microvilli, and there are lymph vessels also in the villus. Those lymph vessels are called lacteals, and these lacteals, they receive the different fat and fat soluble molecules. So in this way there will be absorption. But as I told you, this process is a transport process, either passive or active. Let's try to understand, right, how the different nutrient molecules are absorbed and what are the transporters which are required for their absorption on villi and microvilli, right? So we have to discuss one by one. For example, there are sugars, there are amino acids, there are fatty acids and glycerol, how all these molecules which have been obtained from the food molecules, how these molecules cross this villi and microvilli and then finally get into the blood or get into the lymph vessels, right? So we will discuss. If I will start from the absorption of sugars first, let me discuss first the absorption of sugars. I am talking about the carbohydrates. When there will be digestion of carbohydrates, first there will be digestion of carbohydrates. We have discussed the various types of enzymes which act upon the carbohydrates in mouth, salivary amylase, then in the stomach there is not any kind of carbohydrate enzyme, then in the small intestine pancreatic juice is having some enzymes for the carbohydrates, right? And many carbohydrate digesting enzymes in the intestinal juice. What I mean, after the digestion of these carbohydrates, sugars are released and how these sugars are absorbed. Let's say for example, this is a particular cell of mucosa of the small intestine, right? So this is for example the enterocyte. Enterocyte are the cells present in the villi and microvilli. Enterocytes, this is an enterocyte, a cell which is both absorptive, if you remember, which is both absorptive and secretory as well. It produces many enzymes which are released towards the lumen of the small intestine, and it is also absorptive because the same cell is having many villi and microvilli on it. So let's say these are villi and over the villi there are many microvilli. So let's say for example from this side this is the lumen of small intestine, fine, lumen of the small intestine, right, intestine. So here we have the sugars, we have the different sugars here, they are present in the lumen. Sugars means glucose, okay, sugars means glucose or for example galactose. Let's give two examples, glucose and galactose. These are two important sugars which are released from our food. Okay. Now these sugars, glucose and galactose, they will have to move from the lumen of the small intestine via the villi and microvilli into the enterocytes. First they will reach the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, and from here, from this end, they will move from this surface into the, here we have the, for example, blood capillaries, here we have the blood capillaries, or for example we have the lymph capillaries here. As I told you, these sugars, glucose, galactose, they are water soluble, so they will not go to the lymph capillaries, lymph vessels, lacteals. They will be absorbed into the blood, right? So let's say this is blood vessel here, this is blood capillary here. So now the question is how these sugars, glucose and galactose are absorbed by these villi and microvilli, how they will reach to the cytoplasm of the cell, and from the cytoplasmic end how they move into the blood capillaries, right? So this is the transport process. So it's not so easy as it seems to be, right? It's these sugars like glucose and galactose, or for example fructose, they have to move across the many barriers, first through the villi and microvilli, then into this enterocyte, and from the enterocyte, from this basal membrane into the blood, right, into the blood. So from blood they will go to the circulation. Hope you have got my point, right? So let's discuss. So far as these sugars, glucose and galactose are concerned, right, their absorption, that means absorption of, yes, absorption of, this is the point that you need to write, absorption of glucose and galactose, depends upon sodium concentration. This is the first important point. That means this glucose and the galactose will move, that will be absorbed by the villi and microvilli, then will go to the cytoplasm of the enterocyte and from here into the blood. But their absorption, their transport is dependent on the sodium concentration, Na positive. More the Na positive here, more the Na positive sodium concentration from the luminal side of the small intestine, more is the absorption of glucose and galactose. If there is less concentration of sodium from the luminal side of the small intestine, there will be less influx, there will be less transport of glucose and galactose from the lumen into the enterocyte and then into the blood. So their absorption at villi and microvilli, this is the point. Their absorption, that is absorption of glucose and galactose. Listen again. The absorption of glucose and galactose depends upon the sodium concentration. More the sodium concentration here from the luminal side, from the luminal surface, more is the absorption of glucose and galactose. Less is the concentration of sodium, less will be the influx of this glucose and galactose into the enterocyte then into the blood, right? So, but why they depend on the sodium? Why the absorption of glucose and galactose, for example, depends on the sodium concentration? Why? Because the transporter through which they are absorbed, here is the transporter, obviously. This is actually the transmembrane protein. A transmembrane protein is required, right? On the anterior side, right, there is membrane, plasma membrane. On the plasma membrane, there is a transporter through which the glucose and galactose will be absorbed, will be carried, right? Then finally will go to the blood, right? But this transporter, this is the transporter. This transporter is known as SGLT1. This transporter is known as SGLT1. SGLT1 means sodium glucose, GL means glucose, T means transporter, and 1 is the number. We can have SGL2 that is present in the nephrons, proximal convoluted tubule. Forget about that. So this is here 1, that is SGLT1, sodium glucose transporter. So this glucose and galactose will be absorbed, right? But their absorption depends on the sodium concentration. More the sodium concentration, more is the absorption of glucose and galactose. But why they depend on the sodium concentration? Because this glucose and galactose move through a transporter, that is sodium glucose transporter, and this transporter, it depends upon the sodium influx. This depends on the sodium influx. It is dependent on the sodium concentration. That means it will open, right, in presence of the sodium ions. When there will be sodium ions, this more sodium ion concentration, this transporter will open, and along the same transporter, through the same transporter, the glucose and galactose will move. That means two things will go through the same transporter. Glucose and galactose, if you can see on the board, this glucose and galactose move through the same transporter through which the sodium is moving inside. Yes, that's the point. That means glucose and galactose and sodium, they share the same transporter. When a transporter, when a protein, right, when a transporter is carrying two molecules together, coupling the transport of molecules, this is known as symporter. So this SGLT1 is actually a symporter. It is a symport. Symport is a process of transport. Symporter is that molecule, that transporter which is carrying the two molecules in the same direction. If they are moving in the opposite direction, for example, then it is antiporter. But it is symporter because glucose, galactose and sodium. Glucose, galactose are sugar. Sugars plus this sodium, they are both moving in the same direction. But this transporter will carry the glucose and galactose when there will be high concentration of sodium ions from the luminal side of the intestine, right? So this type of transport, now if we have to mention how the glucose, by which transport process glucose and galactose are absorbed, since we see glucose and galactose are transported, from lower concentration to the higher concentration, they are moving against the concentration gradient. Glucose and galactose are moving against the concentration gradient, but sodium concentration is already very high in the luminal side, so this sodium is moving along the concentration gradient. So the transport of glucose and galactose via the sodium glucose transporter is an active process, while the transport of sodium ions along the same protein, along the same this transporter is a passive process. So two things are happening simultaneously, two things are coupled. glucose and galactose by active transport, while sodium is moving by passive transport. So we can say this absorption of glucose and galactose, which depends upon the sodium ion concentration, occurs via secondary. It's not primary active transport, it is secondary active transport. Yes, this is secondary active transport. I even try to make you understand even in the beginning that secondary active transport means where two molecules are moving in the same direction and one is moving along the concentration gradient, another is moving against the concentration gradient, one is by active process, another is by passive process. But if they are moving through the same transporter, one transport, they share the transporter, this is known as secondary active transport. So glucose, the very important sugar that you need, your brain, your muscles, whatever, they need this fuel. So this glucose, galactose, these two important sugars which are released from the carbohydrates after their digestion, their absorption depends upon the sodium concentration, point number 1. Point 2, that their absorption is not primary active transport, neither the passive transport, it is secondary active transport, where two things are moving simultaneously, that is glucose, galactose and the sodium, and both these sugars and the sodium, they share the same transporter. The transporter is known as SGLT1, that is sodium glucose transporter, right? This is the first point regarding the absorption of the sugars. However, I would like to mention here, if there is, for example, fructose here instead of glucose and galactose, for example, it is fructose here. It is fructose. Fructose is the sweetest sugar, you know that. If it is fructose here, can we say the fructose use the same mechanism for its absorption? No. For the absorption of fructose, there is some different phenomenon. How? For fructose, there is another transporter here. For fructose, there is another transporter here, and this transporter on the enterocyte, on the villi and microvilli, is known as GLUT5. 5 is again number. There are many GLUT transporters, glucose transporter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even 12, 13, right? So this is one of them, that is GLUT5. This GLUT5, although the GLUT stands for glucose, but this is not the transporter for the glucose. Yes, you have to keep in mind. This is very, very interesting thing. GLUT stands for glucose transport, but it is not the transporter for glucose. This is the transporter, this is the protein which is carrying the fructose from the luminal side of the intestine into the enterocyte and then into the blood, right? So this glucose transporter, this GLUT5, it doesn't depend on the sodium. It does not depend on the sodium. It doesn't depend on the sodium concentration, as we have discussed the SGLT1, as the name indicates. It depends on the sodium ion concentration, and both things, that is glucose, galactose and sodium, they are absorbed through the same transporter. They are carried through the same transporter. However, this glucose transporter 5, GLUT5, it is transporter for fructose, and this fructose is not, it does not depend on the sodium ion concentration for its absorption. It does not depend on the sodium concentration for its absorption. So we cannot say the absorption of fructose is secondary active transport, as we have mentioned in the glucose and galactose. So this absorption of fructose via the GLUT5, right, then into the blood here, right, it is the facilitated, yes, it is example of facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion means movement of molecules from higher concentration to the lower concentration, but it is enhanced by a permease, it is enhanced by a helper, and that helper is GLUT5. The process is passive. There is no use of any energy, there is no consumption of any energy. Here in the first one, that is for the transport of glucose and galactose, there is consumption of energy. How? We have not mentioned anywhere, because the sodium concentration that's very important for the absorption, for the opening of this SgLt1, that sodium concentration can only be higher in the luminal side when there is use of this sodium pump, when there is use of sodium pump. The sodium pump that will carry the sodium ions always from the inside to the outside, then and only the sodium ion concentration will be higher in the luminal side. Sodium ion concentration will be higher in the luminal side only when a sodium pump will work initially, right, and that will carry the sodium ions from the inside to the outside against the concentration gradient. At that time there will be use of energy, that is ATP. So energy of ATP is already consumed for maintaining the higher concentration of sodium ions in the luminal side of the gut, luminal side of the small intestine, right. Then when there will be higher concentration of the sodium ions in the luminal side, then there is possibility of transport, absorption of glucose and galactose, otherwise not. And please try to understand, for maintenance of higher concentration of sodium ions at the luminal side, in the luminal side there is use of ATP. So we can say this ATP is indirectly used for the transport of glucose and galactose. But so far as fructose is concerned, for the transport of fructose, there is no use of any energy, there is no consumption of ATP, right. This is carried passively, but this is enhanced, the absorption of fructose is enhanced by a protein that is known as GLUT5. And this type of transport, where the molecule, that is fructose, move from the higher concentration to the lower concentration, but its transport is enhanced by a permease by a protein, that is GLUT5. This is known as facilitated diffusion. So you have to keep in mind that fructose is absorbed by the process of facilitated diffusion. This is your point. If you will be asked tomorrow in the NEET exam, you can go through the textbook. If you will go through the textbook, by the way, you will be so much confused, because that is not elaborated there. You try the I think last pages of your textbook, NCERT, right, but you will not be able to understand fully these concepts, because this is not the topic elaborated in the text. So please try to understand here. If you will be asked how the glucose and galactose, even some other sugars as well, are absorbed, they are absorbed by secondary active transport, and they are absorbed by a transporter, in presence of a transporter that is known as SgLt1, and this SgLt1 depends on the sodium ion concentration. When there will be high concentration of sodium ions in the luminal side, then and only there will be absorption of glucose and galactose, right. But so far as fructose is concerned, the transport of fructose is something different. It does not depend on the sodium ion concentration. It's carried passively from higher concentration to lower concentration, but its absorption is enhanced by a protein that's known as GLUT5. So this is not the secondary active transport, this is example of facilitated diffusion. Hope you have understood, right? So this is actually the first part, that is absorption of sugars. This is my first point regarding the absorption process, absorption of sugars. So we have discussed, we have given in our example, that is glucose and galactose, right, and we have given example of fructose, that is having some different process of absorption, different transport process, right. Now if we will move to the next point, that is absorption of amino acids. By the way, before I go ahead, let me tell you here how, glucose and galactose are absorbed by this SgLt1 from this apical surface into the enterocyte, and fructose is also absorbed via this GLUT5. So finally these molecules, let's say here is glucose, don't be confused, glucose, and then here we have the galactose, for example, right, and here we have now fructose. So they have now reached to the cytoplasm of this enterocyte. But how these molecules will move from this basal surface into the blood? Let's say here is blood, this is blood capillary. So again they have to move through this barrier, right. So all these molecules, that's glucose, galactose, even this fructose, they will be carried into the blood capillaries. Here again we have a transporter, that's a common transporter for all these molecules, that's known as GLUT2. So this is again the facilitated diffusion here. So from this end from the villi and microvilli end, there is secondary active transport of glucose and galactose, there is facilitated diffusion of the fructose, but all these molecules, once they reach to the enterocyte, cytoplasm of the enterocyte, from the cytoplasm of the enterocyte into the blood, they move, they are transported via the facilitated diffusion, and facilitated diffusion with the help of this protein is known as GLUT2, GLUT2, right. So you have to remember some transporter molecules for the complete comprehension of this topic. One is this SGLT1, which is shared by glucose and galactose and sodium. Second is this GLUT5, which is the transporter for the fructose from this end, but from this end there is only one transporter that is carrying all these molecules from the cytoplasm into the blood, that's known as GLUT2, right. And from this end, this is simply the facilitated diffusion. Move on. Now, so far as amino acids are concerned, after the digestion of proteins, we will get amino acids. Let us try to understand how amino acids are transported. So, let us write absorption of amino acids. Finally, after the digestion of proteins, there is release of amino acids, how the amino acids are transported. So far as the absorption of amino acids is concerned, from the lumen into the blood, again because they are water soluble molecules, these amino acids are absorbed just like the glucose and galactose. That means they are absorbed via the process of secondary active transport, most of the amino acids. And it has been found that, it's very much in the research, that almost there are seven transporters on the villi and microvilli which absorb these amino acids. As you have seen the SGLT1, likewise there are many transporters on the villi and microvilli for the absorption of amino acids. But 5 of them, out of these 7, 5 of these transporters which absorb, which transport the amino acids, 5 out of 7 are again dependent on, they are also dependent on sodium ion concentration. When sodium ion concentration is higher from the luminal side, there is much absorption of amino acids. Less the sodium ion concentration from the luminal side, less is the absorption of amino acids. So if the process is just like the glucose and galactose, right, so we can again say that absorption of amino acids from the luminal side into the blood across the enterocyte, right, occurs by the process of secondary active transport, because again two molecules are moving in the same direction, one is actively, another is passively. That is, transport of sodium is active process, but sodium is moving passively across the same transporter, through the same transporter, right. So if we write again, for example, this is again enterocyte as I have last time drawn. This is enterocyte, villi, microvilli, this is cytoplasm of the enterocyte. Let me write again, enterocyte, right. And here this is the lumen of small intestine, and here we have the amino acids, right. These need to be absorbed. They will be absorbed by the villi and microvilli. This is the transporter. This transporter, right, this transporter will be open in presence of sodium. So two things, sodium and amino acids. Sodium and amino acids will move through the same transporter. So again this transporter is shared by the two molecules, that's amino acids and sodium. So again this process, the process of absorption of amino acids, please try to understand, absorption of amino acids from the lumen into the blood is secondary active transport. Why secondary active transport? Because amino acids are transported against the concentration gradient, they are moving against the concentration gradient, and they need sodium ions. They will flow with the sodium ions through the same transporter. But for the maintenance of higher concentration of sodium ions in the luminal side, there is need of energy, that is energy of ATP. So this is again the process of secondary active transport via these amino acids are absorbed first into the enterocyte, and from here they move into the blood. From this end they move directly into the blood, right. So this is absorption of amino acids, right. So we can conclude this point in a simplest way that transport of glucose and galactose which occurs by the process of secondary active transport is very much similar to the transport of amino acids, which also depend on the sodium ion concentration for their absorption, for their transport, right. And in both the cases this is one transporter that is known as symporter, both for glucose and galactose, now for amino acids, which is transporting all these molecules from the luminal side to the blood, right. Now here I would like to add a point, right. Generally the amino acids, first the proteins are digested and then amino acids are absorbed by the same process as I mentioned, right. But small peptides, sometimes some small peptides are directly absorbed without being converted into amino acids. Small peptides means dipeptides, or for example tripeptides, which are made of 2 amino acids where there is chain of 2 or 3 amino acids. They are sometimes absorbed without being converted into amino acids. So there is, if you can remember, again for example this is enterocyte, and now we are talking about some peptides. Let us say I will write here small peptides. These small peptides are directly absorbed, right, without being converted into amino acids. How? There is a transporter for these small peptides. Here on the villi and microvilli there is a transporter again, and this transporter is carrying these small peptides, but this transporter depends on the H positive ion concentration. Instead of sodium, for the transport of these small peptides from the luminal side into the enterocyte and then into the blood, this transporter of small peptides depends on H positive ion concentration, and this transporter is known as PEPT1. That is, this is peptide, PEP for peptide transporter 1, and this peptide transporter, it is transporting the small peptides, but it depends on its opening depends on the concentration of H positive ions, and more the H positive ions here on the luminal side, more is the transport of these small peptides into the enterocyte, and then into the blood again, right, blood capillaries. So here we have seen one more transporter, that is transporter for small peptides which are not converted into amino acids. Without converted into amino acids, they are absorbed by the PEPT1, that's peptide transporter 1, but that doesn't depend on the sodium ion concentration, that depends on the H positive ion concentration. And for maintenance of the H positive ion concentration, again there is need of energy, there is use of ATP, then and only there will be high concentration of H positive ions. So they are pumped into the luminal side so that there will be high concentration of H positive ions, which will help the transport of small peptides, right. So this is again the transport of these small peptides is again secondary active transport. Transport of small peptides is again example of secondary active transport. Yes, let me mention again, the process of absorption of small peptides from the lumen into the blood via this peptide transporter 1, which depends on the H positive ion concentration, is again example of secondary active transport. These things will be asked to you, right. Anyways, move ahead. Now lastly, I would like to discuss the process of absorption of fats, how the fats are absorbed, how the fat molecules are absorbed. So absorption of fats, right. Now see again, These fats, first of all, these fats which are made of fatty acids and alcohol, that's maybe glycerol, generally glycerol. So first these fats, you know that these are digested, at before the digestion they are emulsified, there is emulsification. Emulsification, we have last time discussed the emulsification, right. So emulsification, where the fat molecules are broken into smaller droplets due to reduction in the surface tension, and this is the function of bile salts, by the way, which are very much responsible for this emulsification of fats. So first there is emulsification of these fats are emulsified, then they undergo the digestion process, then there is digestion, right. And when there is digestion of these emulsified fats, enzymes, that is lipases, last time we discussed pancreatic lipase, that act upon these emulsified fats, and finally these emulsified fats are digested into glycerol. Yes, there is release of glycerol plus fatty acids, right. But besides the glycerol and the fatty acids, our food, you know, generally many animal foods, they contain one more component that is known as cholesterol. So here, along with the glycerol and the fatty acids, another component of the fat, another component of the lipid is cholesterol, right. So these things now are present in the lumen of the small intestine after the digestion of the fats. This cholesterol is actually present in the form of cholesterol ester, and this is digested here in the small intestine. So in lumen of the small intestine, these three things are present, that's glycerol, fatty acids and cholesterol. These are all, you know, fatty things, these are lipid molecules, right. Anyways, particularly the cholesterol, fatty acids, right. Now before they are absorbed, these can be absorbed by the villi and microvilli, because there is digestion, now they are completely hydrolyzed, right. But before they undergo the process of absorption, these must be mixed up with the bile salts, because generally you can see these fatty acids, long chain fatty acids, cholesterol, right, they are water insoluble molecules, they are hydrophobic in nature, and being hydrophobic in nature, they will not be absorbed by the villi and microvilli. One thing. Second thing, they will not go to the blood capillaries, they will not be transported by the blood capillaries of the villi and microvilli, rather they will be transported by the lymph vessels, as I have already mentioned, that is lacteals, right. But before they are absorbed by the villi and microvilli, they get mixed up with the bile salts, this glycerol and product of the fat digestion, fatty acids and product of fat digestion, and cholesterol, right. These molecules get mixed up in the bile salts. So plus, let me write here, plus bile salts, they are mixed with the bile salts. Why? Because these bile salts help in their absorption. How? Because these bile salts, they are amphipathic in nature, amphipathic in nature. That means the bile salts, if for example we say bile salts here, these are the bile salts, right, around these fat molecules, around the end products of fat digestion, these are the bile salts, you know, these structures if you can see on the board. So this is a bile salt, for example this is bile salt. This bile salt is amphipathic in nature. Amphipathic means it is having one end which is very close to these fatty molecules, right, and this end is hydrophobic. From this end it interacts with the end products of fat digestion, bile salt. Bile salt from this end interacts with the end products of fat digestion, and from this end it is hydrophilic, and from this end it can interact with the water. So it is both amphipathic in nature. So in this way it will help for the transport of, you know, these molecules. Otherwise there is problem with the absorption of these molecules which are completely hydrophobic in nature, right. So before they are absorbed, before these glycerol, fatty acids and cholesterol, even some other fatty molecules, fat soluble vitamins, right, A, D, E, K, before they are absorbed, they are first get surrounded by these bile salts, and these bile salts do two things. They assemble these these end products of the fat digestion, they assemble them. This is the core, for example, where the glycerol, fatty acids and cholesterol is present, and from the periphery these are the hydrophilic ends of the bile salts, right. This structure which is having a core and the periphery, in the core there are the end products of fat digestion, glycerol, fatty acids and cholesterol, fat soluble vitamins also, right. And on the outside there is the bile salts. The structure so formed, it is a cylindrical structure which is formed. This cylindrical structure is known as mixed micelles. So please try to understand, before the fat and products of fat digestion are absorbed, like glycerol, fatty acids and cholesterol, fat soluble vitamins, before they are absorbed they are converted into mixed micelles. What do you mean by mixed micelle? Mixed micelle means two things: end products of fat digestion plus bile salts. Bile salts, they interact both with the water from the one end, outer end, and from the other end, inner end, let's say, to the with the these fatty acids, glycerol and cholesterol, right. So this whole structure, that's known as mixed micelle, bile salts plus end products of fat digestion is absorbed. By the way, this mixed micelle, these are cylindrical structures with 50 angstroms diameter, right. These are actually absorbed by the villi and microvilli. So the fat and products of fat digestion like fatty acids, glycerol, cholesterol, fat soluble vitamins are not absorbed as such. First they get mixed up with the bile salts, and the new structure so formed is known as mixed micelle. These are the mixed micelles which are absorbed by the villi and microvilli. So let's say, for example, again these all things could happen, and now this is again this enterocyte with villi, microvilli, okay. This is enterocyte with villi and microvilli, and this is the lumen of the small intestine ileum, and here we have the first, they were, yes, fatty acids, yes, fatty acids plus glycerol, fine, plus cholesterol, okay, plus cholesterol, right, plus fat soluble vitamins, these all things. Now these all things are present in the, they are surrounded by the bile salts, and this whole structure is known as mixed micelle. Now this mixed micelle, in the core of which are present the fatty acids, glycerol, cholesterol and fat soluble vitamins, this structure will be absorbed by the villi and microvilli, not by any transporter. This is by simple diffusion. So these all fatty and products of fat digestion, fatty molecules, they are absorbed by the simple diffusion via the villi and microvilli, right. But first they need to be mixed with the bile salts, and the structure that will be formed there is known as mixed micelle. So mixed micelles are absorbed by villi and microvilli by simple diffusion. Now they will reach, these all things will reach here. This is the cytoplasm of the enterocyte. So this fatty acid, glycerol, cholesterol, fat soluble vitamins, they will reach here in the cytoplasm of the enterocyte. Now here you have to keep in mind, in the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, what will happen? In the cytoplasm of enterocyte there is SER. SER means smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum, right. This is one of the most important cell organelle of a eukaryotic cell. So this smooth endoplasmic reticulum will help in a process. What that process? Once these fatty acids, glycerol, cholesterol will come to the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, there will be re-esterification. In the smooth endoplasmic reticulum of the enterocyte, smooth endoplasmic reticulum which is present in the cytoplasm of enterocyte, there will be a process that's known as re-esterification. Re-esterification. What is that? Re-esterification means this fatty acid which dissociated from the glycerol during the process of digestion in the lumen of the gut, it will again combine with the glycerol and form fat again. or it may combine with the cholesterol and cholesterol will be converted into cholesterol ester. Try to understand. Once these all molecules, these are the end products of fat digestion, once they will move into the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, in the enterocyte there is smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum there will be reesterification. That means this fatty acid and glycerol will again combine. If it will combine here in the smooth endoplasmic, it will again form the fat, that is triglyceride, fat or triglyceride, okay, triglyceride. And cholesterol will be converted into cholesterol ester, right now. So there is reesterification of many fats, many fatty acids in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now after the reesterification, that is this fatty acid and glycerol is again converted into fat, cholesterol is converted into cholesterol ester, but there will be no change in the fat soluble vitamins, no. Right, so they will remain as such. Now all these molecules after the reesterification, right, they will be packed in another cell organelle. These molecules are packed means they are enclosed by some other molecules. Now this fat, triglyceride, this cholesterol ester and fat soluble vitamins, they are packed by Golgi body. They are packed in the Golgi bodies. In the Golgi bodies, with the help of, in the Golgi bodies they are enveloped, they are packed by some phospholipids, These are the secretions of Golgi bodies, phospholipids, again amphipathic in nature. And there is one more thing in the Golgi bodies of this enterocyte, that is known as apolipoproteins, apolipoproteins, these two things. 80% is this phospholipid and 20% will be this apoproteins. That means these are the two molecules which enclose these fats which are reesterified, cholesterol ester, fat soluble vitamins. They are surrounded by these two things, that is phospholipids and apolipoproteins. And please try to understand, these phospholipids and apolipoproteins, they are secreted by the Golgi bodies. So it is a Golgi body which is packing the reesterified fats which are reesterified in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, right. Now we can say here, for example, let's say for example, this is fat, triglyceride, this is cholesterol, let's add fat soluble vitamins. Now these are packed, if you can see on the board, these are packed by these molecules. Now again a structure is formed, another structure is formed, right. And in the periphery of this there are two things, this one, that is apolipoprotein, and this phospholipid, which is provided by the Golgi body. First there is reesterification in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, then there is packing by the Golgi body, and these two things are given by the Golgi body, phospholipids and apolipoprotein. And this structure formed where the core contains the reesterified fats, cholesterol ester and fat soluble vitamins, and in the periphery there are phospholipids and apolipoproteins. The structure so formed is known as chylomicron. So in the enterocyte, in the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, there is formation of chylomicrons. This is formation of chylomicrons. Very interesting, tricky as well. So there is first formation of chylomicron, yet they have not reached to the blood or for example lymph, right? No. There is packing, first they are reesterified in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, then there is packing in the Golgi bodies, packing with the help of phospholipids and apolipoproteins. So these are acting like the cover, outside cover, right? Cardboard box, right? Which have enclosed inside the fat triglyceride which was reesterified in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and cholesterol and fat soluble vitamins. Now outside cardboard box is made up of phospholipids and apolipoproteins. Now the cargo will go into the lymph, not in the blood, I told you initially, right? So this structure, now the cardboard box, inside there is fat, there is cholesterol, there is fat soluble vitamins, and outside cardboard cover, just analogy, right, is made up of phospholipids and apolipoproteins. Now this cargo will be it will be dispatched, and it will be dispatched from the cytoplasm from the Golgi bodies into the lymph lies from this side, right, lymph vessels, lacteals from this side. So now what molecules, what structures are actually moving from the cytoplasm of the enterocyte into the lymph? These, that is chylomicrons, the core of which is made up of this fat, cholesterol, fat soluble vitamin, and outside it is made up of phospholipids and apolipoproteins. So finally these chylomicrons are absorbed into the, lymph vessels, and I told you these lymph vessels which are receiving, right, the dispatched chylomicrons from the enterocyte are known as lacteals, and finally these lacteals, they will open into a bigger duct that's known as thoracic duct, lymphatic duct, this thoracic lymphatic duct, and finally this thoracic lymphatic duct opens into the blood circulation. It will carry these molecules to the heart, right, and then they will go to the main circulation. Anyways, so first there is formation of these chylomicrons, and finally these chylomicrons which have packed these all fats, cholesterol, fat soluble vitamins, they are absorbed into the lymph vessels called the lacteals, right. So this is how the fats are absorbed, something very different from the absorption of glucose, galactose or fructose or amino acids. So you have to understand here, first the fats are digested, but before the digestion there is emulsification. It is the emulsified fats which are digested, and finally there is release of glycerol, fatty acids, cholesterol, esters, fat soluble vitamins. These are all hydrophobic in nature and water soluble in nature, so they must be mixed up with the bile salts. So first thing that is formed there is known as mixed micelle. These are the mixed micelles which are absorbed by the villi and the microvilli by simple diffusion, and then once they reach to the cytoplasm of the enterocyte, which is the lining of the gut, and in the enterocyte, on the villi and microvilli, inside the enterocyte there is reesterification. That reesterification occurs in the SER, and finally this reesterified fat lipid is packed in the Golgi body, is packed by the apolipoproteins and phospholipids, that are the secretions of Golgi body, and the new structure so formed, is known as chylomicron. These chylomicrons have very large diameter of 1000 angstroms. They have very large diameter of 1000 angstroms, and these chylomicrons are finally dispatched from the enterocyte cytoplasm into the lymph vessels, not into the blood capillaries, and these lymph vessels are called as lacteals, right. So this is how the absorption of fats is taking place. Hope you have understood. If you have any confusion, any problem, you can rewind the video, you can watch the video again, right, you will understand. And the most importantly, you need to consult, you need to see your books as well, reference books, any reference book, that's not a big deal. And one more thing, that's your textbook as well, because this is very much this topic given on your textbook, but I told you this is not so much elaborated there, and that is why there is need of teachers, there is need of counseling, right. So this is the elaboration of this topic, right. Now if you will, for example, go through the textbook, first you will watch the video and then you will go through the textbook, I am sure you will definitely understand these concepts, right. So this is all about the digestion and absorption. We have almost completed this chapter, the first chapter. There are some minor things as well. If you will go through the reference books, there are many things that you may come across in the reference books, but that's not so much important from the entrance point of view, from the board exam point of view, right. And you are capable, you are intelligent enough, right. You have to increase your efficiency in the 21st century where there is everything high tech, right. So you need to increase your efficiency. Some things need to be understood by yourself, right. So go through the books, be book lovers, and you will understand each and everything. Thank you for watching this video.